Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in today. This is Kathy. This is the second video in a series of 3 featuring the My Favorite Things Which Way is the Candy stamp set. For this first card, which is actually the 3rd card in the series, I started out by tracing the windows from the Stitched Triple Peekaboo Windows die. That is also by My Favorite Things. I just traced those onto a piece of 80-pound Nina Classic Solar White cardstock. That is trimmed down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I traced those windows there just as a guide so I would know where to stamp the cute little critters. And I'll be stamping the critters in Memento Tuxedo Black ink because it is Copic friendly, and once again I'll be using my favorite Copic markers. After I have them all stamped up, I just start the coloring, and I'll leave you with some music while I finish that up. Once I was finished with the coloring, I decided to stamp and heat emboss the sentiment. So I stamped it in Memento Luxe Wedding Dress ink onto a piece of black cardstock, coated it with white embossing powder, and heat set it with my heat tool. After I was done with that, I trimmed it down to a little sentiment strip. Just cut it down with my paper trimmer, easy peasy. After I had that all trimmed up, I had actually run the window die cut through my Gemini Junior with a piece of patterned cardstock. And the patterned cardstock is also cut down to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. Kind of placed it to see where I wanted everything to be, and used my Tombow Multi-Mono liquid glue to adhere the sentiment down. Once I had that where I wanted it and glued down, I used foam tape to adhere the patterned paper on top of the white cardstock. And with foam tape, of course, I used a whole bunch of it because I wanted to have foam tape in between the little windows so it wouldn't collapse when it goes through the mail there. A little tip with foam tape to save you a couple of pennies here and there is cut the strip down the center in half to get thinner strips so you can do the edge from corner to corner, top to bottom, yada yada. Once I had all the foam tape on there, and as you can see, I love foam tape as much as my Copic markers because I tend to use a lot of it, I just adhered that on top of the white panel with the stamping. That was then adhered to a piece of black cardstock that measures 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. And then I just put that onto a top folding white note card that is size A2. And that finishes up card number 3. For card number 4, still using the same stamp set, only this time I wanted to do a spooky background and I wanted to mask off the edge. So I used a scalloped frame die from Honeybee Stamps, and I just traced the rectangle so I would know where to stamp the little critters. I did do a lot of masking there. These are the same masks that I used in the previous cards, and I did use them for placement as well. I knew that I was going to be blending kind of like a night sky, and I added the moon kind of at the last minute, so I had to cut out a mask pretty quick there. I just used a regular old Post-it note, and then I put a little bit of the Tombow Multi-Mono liquid glue on the back and set that aside to dry before I placed it on my stamped card. Here I'm just using good old-fashioned painter's tape to mask off the areas on the outside so that the inking will only be on the inside of that rectangle. I did mask the images off so that they would stay white so I could color them in with Copic markers as well. I used my Distressed Oxide inks. I started with Black Soot at the top and then moved on to Faded Jeans, and I'm not sure if the foam on my blending tool was a little dry, but it wasn't blending the way I wanted it until I give it a good rub on the ink pad there, and then I got much better coverage. After that, I used Seedless Preserves for the bottom, and then I wanted my kitty and pumpkins to look like they were on kind of a grassy area, so for the bottom I used Peeled Paint ink. Once I was done with that, I wanted to create some clouds, and I saw this technique on another YouTube channel, Ashley Tucker Designs. So after I was done with the ink blending, which clearly I'm not done with it yet, anyway, I wanted to create some clouds. So after I was done with all of the ink blending, I went ahead and got a little bit of water into a little cup with just a regular old paintbrush. I think that's a number 8 brush. And then just kind of started to spread water around because the oxide inks react with water. And it was right about here that I realized that I was not on watercolor cardstock, and the cardstock started to pill a little bit because of the water. So I just stopped and left the clouds as they were and removed the masks so that I could start with the Copic coloring. And some of the ink bled into the moon there, and I try and remove it with a little bit of water and a paper towel. And I got most of it up, but you'll see later on that I didn't get enough of it up to be covered up by the yellow marker, so I show you how to fix that a little bit later. This card was definitely, I struggled with it after this point, and after I got the coloring done. I don't like rulers, and rulers don't like me, but we'll get to that a little bit later. In the meantime, I'll leave you with some music while I finish up the coloring. After I had the pumpkins and the kitty colored in, I start to work on the moon. But some of the ink had bled underneath the mask, and I couldn't get it covered up with the yellow marker. So I decided to do a quick and easy fix for that, which was just to stamp the moon again onto a piece of scrap cardstock. Once I had it stamped, I colored it in with the markers and then just fussy cut that out. There are coordinating dies to this stamp set, but I don't have them, and so that's why I did so much masking and a lot of fussy cutting for these particular cards. After I had colored in the moon, I just fussy cut it with my scissors, and then I just adhere it flat on top of the moon, the original moon that's stamped on the panel with the kitty. Also, when I do fussy cutting, I basically hold the scissors straight and I move the cardstock around rather than trying to move my scissors. I find that it just makes it a little bit easier, and I get cleaner edges by moving the cardstock more than the scissors. Once I had that cut out, I just used a water-based black marker to go around the edge, just to kind of soften up the cut lines a little bit, and it'll cover up the white edge there, so it looks a little bit more cohesive when I adhere it down onto the stamped panel. And here is where things start to get a little bit challenging for me. I have a love-hate relationship with rulers. They don't like me. And I finally bought myself a T-square thinking that this would help. And I really kind of wanted to make this a one-layer card, but I wanted to add a border around the inked and stamped panel. So I just decided to try and draw a couple of black lines, and I think one of the things that I should have done differently was I definitely should have used a different marker. This one I think the tip was just a little bit too fat to get the lines the way I wanted them, and I just was too lazy to reach behind me and grab a thinner one. So after I get this all done, I look and I try and straighten them out, and it kind of blobs, and I'm like, yeah, no, I don't like that. So another easy fix is I just cut it off all the way down to where the inking stopped around the border. And since I had used the die from Honeybee Stamps, I knew that that panel would fit within that scalloped die. So after I glue down the moon, I grab a piece of black cardstock and run that through my Gemini Junior with the scalloped rectangle die. And that was another quick fix for that. Here I'm just kind of cleaning up a little bit of ink that I got inside the eyes there. So I just adhere the stamped panel to that scalloped rectangle, and I adhere that onto the patterned paper, which is from the Black and White Basics, which is also from My Favorite Things. I put that onto a top folding white note card that is A2 size, and add a little bit of foam tape to the back of my stamped panel and add that to the front of the card. And that finishes up card number 4. I will link to the first video in the series at the end. If you've not yet subscribed, please do so. I will have the third video up soon. And thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.